Here comes Rossi on the brakes again. Even Valentino Rossi, and he runs it a little bit wide. Even Rossi couldn't get up the inside of Marquez.
This is Ramshock. We've got one more braking area down into the chicane. Marquez is building. He goes for the inside. I can hardly believe that. Valentino squeezes him. They go across the track.
This race is only just one part of the story of the Malaysian Grand Prix. What is going to happen in race control after this race? Because this is not over by any stretch of the imagination.
Every sport has rivalries. Most stay on the track. This one didn't. What started as a battle for a championship became a war that divided riders, fans, and an entire sport for the better part of a decade. 10 years later, people still argue about what really happened, because this wasn't just a feud. It was the feud that MotoGP spent the next decade trying to escape. The hero, the prodigy, and the day it started to turn.
Thank you. A handshake at last.
By the early 2010s, Valentino Rossi was already the biggest name the sport had ever produced. A 9-time world champion who had carried MotoGP's popularity on his own shoulders for over a decade. Marc Marquez was the opposite. Young, fearless, and arriving fast. He'd idolized Rossi as a kid. For a while, the two were genuinely friendly. Marquez has spoken about looking up to the Italian, and Rossi, by most accounts, liked him in return.
This is the warehouse of the academy. You cannot imagine how I feel when I'm here, because for a rider, this is a dream.
Something shifted in 2014 when Marquez visited Rossi's private training ranch in Tavullia. According to people close to both camps, Marquez arrived with a full Honda factory crew and truck, a level of seriousness that reportedly unsettled Rossi, who saw the ranch as a place for riders to simply enjoy riding together, not another arena to be won. It was a small moment. Almost nothing happened. But several people who knew both riders later pointed to that day as the beginning of something cooling between them. One represented MotoGP's past. The other was already becoming its future. Eventually, admiration would turn into suspicion. Most sports keep their rivals at a literal distance, opposite ends of a court, opposite sides of a pitch. MotoGP doesn't allow for that. Riders fight for the same 6 inches of tarmac, elbow to elbow, at speeds well over 300 kilometers an hour for the entire length of a race. There is no room in that environment to fully separate a personal grievance from a split-second decision on the brakes, which means that once trust between two riders breaks down, the danger isn't only emotional, it's physical. The accusation that changed the season. By October 2015, Rossi was leading the championship by 18 points over his own Yamaha teammate, Jorge Lorenzo, with 3 races left. Marquez, on a Honda that hadn't been competitive enough to fight for the title that year, was no longer a contender himself. At the Australian Grand Prix in Phillip Island, Rossi noticed something in Marquez's lap times that bothered him. A sudden brief drop in pace late in the race that Rossi believed was Marquez easing off deliberately to help Lorenzo close in on the title. Rossi said as much publicly, days before the next race at Sepang. He accused Marquez of trying to manipulate the result of the championship to deny Rossi a 10th title. Marquez denied it outright, visibly stunned that his childhood hero would suggest it in public. Once Rossi stopped believing Marquez was racing him fairly, everything changed. The championship stopped being a title fight. It became a trust problem. Sepang. October 25th, 2015, the Malaysian Grand Prix. From the moment the race started, Marquez raced directly against Rossi, overtaking him repeatedly, refusing to simply let him by, exactly the kind of hard racing that, under normal circumstances, nobody would have questioned. These were not normal circumstances. on lap 7, at turn 14, Rossi ran wide, pushing Marquez off the racing line. The two touched. Marquez hit the gravel and was out of the race. Race director Mike Webb and his team reviewed the incident for nearly an hour afterward. Their conclusion: Marquez had broken no rule with his riding, however provocative it had felt. Rossi had. He was handed 3 penalty points, enough, combined with one he already carried, to send him to the back of the grid for the championship decider 2 weeks later in Valencia. Rossi has maintained ever since that he never intended to make Marquez crash, only to slow him down. Marquez has maintained, just as consistently, that he was simply riding his own race and that Rossi reacted to provocation that wasn't real. Nobody has ever fully agreed on what actually happened in those few seconds at turn 14, and that disagreement became the story. The incident lasted seconds. The argument has lasted 10 years. Modern MotoGP relies on stewards reviewing footage after the fact to determine intent, a judgment call made under time pressure, watching the same few seconds of video everyone else is watching. 2 trained officials can watch identical footage and reach different conclusions about whether contact was deliberate. When the sport's own decision-makers can't be entirely certain, the fans and media covering the incident certainly won't be either. In moments like these, perception becomes just as powerful as whatever actually happened. The rivalry the fans wouldn't let go of.
Not one of the races that Marc Marquez will remember at the end of his career, but this in many ways is the start of the rest of his career.
Rossi finished 4th at Valencia. Lorenzo won the title. For Rossi's fan base, among the largest and most devoted in the sport's history, the result felt less like a loss than a theft. Marquez, then just 22, needed extra security at Italian rounds for years afterward. Booze became a fixture of his races on Italian soil. The hostility never fully cooled, even as both riders moved on to other championships, other rivalries, other seasons.
But now he can head off to the United States and get his arm fixed and hopefully come back stronger in the future.
A brief thaw arrived in 2016, a handshake between the two at Catalunya, an attempt at something approaching normality. It didn't last. In 2018, contact between them at the Argentine Grand Prix reignited the entire thing, and from that point on, genuine reconciliation never really arrived. The riders created the feud. The fans made it permanent. For a stretch of years, the consequences went beyond the two men involved. Sponsors grew nervous about a sport whose biggest storyline had curdled into something closer to hostility than rivalry. Grandstands split visibly along loyalty lines. Every race weekend risked becoming another referendum on Sepang rather than a contest in its own right. For a while, it genuinely felt as though the feud had become the story of MotoGP. The feud that outlived both their careers.
On my side of the bike and later on, we have that small contact that created me to pick up the bike and to race together. So
Rossi retired at the end of 2021. He went on to race GT3 sports cars and built his own VR46 academy to mentor a new generation of riders, among them Pecco Bagnaia, who became MotoGP champion in 2022 and 2023. The old feud somehow found its way into the next generation anyway. In 2024, an on-track incident at the Aragon Grand Prix between Bagnaia and Alex Marquez, Marc's younger brother, immediately drew comparisons to Sepang 9 years earlier. Marc, by then Bagnaia's own factory Ducati teammate, found himself in an awkward position, careful not to be seen taking sides too obviously while clearly sympathetic to his brother.
On Bagnaia, he's wide, and that might be it. That might well be it from Marc Marquez. 7 attempts, and it's not lucky number 7.
In 2024 interviews, Rossi reignited the original feud directly, calling Marquez the dirtiest rider he had ever faced. The comment drew fresh criticism, with some fans publicly suggesting Rossi was struggling to let a decade-old grievance go. At the end of the 2025 season, the 10th anniversary of Sepang, and the year Marquez finally equalled Rossi's tally of 7 Premier Class titles, Rossi was loudly booed during the official end-of-season awards ceremony in Valencia. Two-time champion Casey Stoner, asked about it on a podcast appearance in 2024, gave his own verdict. Even though everybody blames Mark for the whole thing, Stoner said, "People forget that Valentino started it. Most rivalries need races to survive. This one didn't. This one followed both riders into entirely different chapters of their lives." Why this feud was different. MotoGP had bitter rivalries before Sepang. Rossi against Max Biaggi, Rossi against Sete Gibernau, Rossi against his own teammate, Lorenzo. What made this one different wasn't the contact, or even the penalty. It was that the two men at the centre of it never agreed on a single shared version of events, not at the time, and not a decade later. 10 years after Sepang, one of the two men at the centre of it finally sounded tired of carrying it. Speaking to a Spanish newspaper, Marquez seemed to put the matter to rest publicly for the first time. "One of the things I've learned throughout my racing career is to have respect for my rivals," he said. "It's hard to live with resentment." Every great rivalry usually settles eventually into one accepted story. This one may have had 10 million different versions, and for the better part of 10 years, none of them fully went away. What the feud actually cost the sport.
The crowd are turned for. I can see the Miller Army. They're going completely crazy. What a final lap here. Jack Miller's over the moon.
Championships come and go. Riders retire. Records get broken and broken again. Most controversies fade with them. This one didn't, because it was never really about a single corner or a single race. It was about trust between two people who had once admired each other, and what happens to everyone around them once that trust is gone. The racing moved on long ago. Parts of MotoGP never completely did. Who do you think was right in the Rossi-Marquez feud? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing. There are many more incredible stories from MotoGP history still to come.